Alec Peirce, Vintage Scuba. Now, you know, in these Vintage Scuba series, all I'm trying to do is show you some interesting stuff from the past. That's all. You don't like it, don't watch. But a lot of this is pretty interesting, and it is a big part of our scuba diving history. So if you're interested in knowing a bit about the scuba diving sport, where it came from, how it developed, and the people involved, and so on, keep watching. That's what I'm doing. And right here, I have an example of an important part of scuba diving sport, the sport of scuba diving, of its past history. SkinDiver magazine. But SkinDiver, at one time, magazines were a big deal. That's how we got to communication. This is pre-computer, before Wikipedia, before Google, and so on. If you wanted to learn about scuba diving at one time, you took a course on scuba diving. And then you were on your own. That was it. You could join a club, but the guys in the club were old, and they went diving 3 or 4 times a year and had a good time, and they laughed and drank beer and so on. You didn't really learn and develop. If you wanted to see what was new and read articles and learn about different types of gear and so on, then you subscribed or bought every month SkinDiver magazine. It was by far the most popular and the most influential magazine in the entire sport of skin and scuba diving that ever came out. It was called SkinDiver because at that time, the first issue was December 1951. At that time, we were called SkinDivers. That's right. Scuba had not been invented. The word scuba had not been invented. So we were called lung divers or skin divers. Well, lung diver wasn't a real good name for a magazine. It could have been a medical magazine. So it was called SkinDiver magazine. And that applied to scuba divers. It included snorkelers as well, but it was for scuba divers. And it was called SkinDiver right up until its last issue, which was 55 years later. Yeah, it was around for a long time. Anyway, SkinDiver magazine. It was fantastic. And when I was a young man, a young skin diver, starting in 57, 58, I actually started scuba diving. So in 58, 9, 60, in all those years, I never missed an issue. Boy, oh boy. I was waiting there at the newsstand. I remember the old guy that used to run the place, and he thought I was weird. But I was waiting outside on the day that I thought the SkinDiver magazine was coming in pretty regular in my small town. And I was there with my $1.25 to buy that magazine. That's a lot of money. I had to work for about 4 or 5 hours to earn $1.25. And I saved it up so I could buy every issue of SkinDiver magazine. Now, interesting enough, I still have them. Every issue. Right from the very first, which is a very rare, very valuable issue, right on up. I stopped buying them in the 90s, but I have every one of them. And a lot of scuba divers did. Some still do. They were very, very popular. And they were read many, many times. If you were able to get a hold of some old copies of SkinDiver magazine, most of them are well read. You might find the odd ones in perfect condition, but most of them were well read. Not like a lot of magazines, you read them once and it's over. SkinDiver magazine. In fact, they were so popular that the organization, Peirce Publishing, actually made binders. These hardcover binders called SkinDiver, you see, so that you could put your SkinDiver magazines, a full year supply from January right through to December, all 12 of them into one of these special binders. And they had special clips at the back with rods to hold the magazines. And the magazines themselves are pretty exciting. Now you need to appreciate, this particular one is from 1964. You need to appreciate the color photography, particularly underwater color photography, was in its infancy. The first few issues actually were black and white. It wasn't until, I'll be guessing here, it wasn't until the early 60s, 61, 2, 3, prior to this, that the first color issues came out. And I can recall very, very well on those first issues with colored pictures, and they made a big deal about that. Yeah, they said, color pictures inside. Check this out. What's this say on here? What's it say? Color photos. Extraordinary underwater color photos. You see? So this gives you an idea how early is this. So there's the first issue, January, and there's February, a diver on the surface. Let me see if I can't find an interesting cover to show you here. There should be one right in here somewhere. What's this? Oh, there's one there. Now this is a really interesting one because this particular photograph, this cover, is not a photograph. This is a painting. This is a painting by a very famous painter. His name was John Steele. And John, I don't know exactly how many, but I know that John painted many for many of the covers of SkinDiver. Many of his paintings appeared on SkinDiver magazine. Many of his paintings were used as covers for SkinDiver magazine. And now his paintings are quite valuable. A very dear friend of mine, Sam, who lives in California, has a number of John Steele's original paintings signed by him. I have no idea what they're worth, but even as a keepsake, they're almost invaluable. So this is actually a painting. But you get the idea. Not too much color photography was available then. Look at here. There's one here. A fellow underwater, a diver underwater, looks like me. Anyway, a diver underwater with his camera and everything else. SkinDiver magazine. This is May 1964. Pretty neat, huh? Spectacular color. Yeah, it was a big deal. Color photography was a big deal. Let's see what else is in here. There's a diver underwater. And you see that it was a big deal back then. Is this by, yes, this is another John Steele cover. That's not a photograph, that's a painting. John Steele painted that. There we go. There's a lady underwater. I'm going to guess that this is in one of the Florida springs. It looks like she's diving in one of the Florida springs. Can you see that a bit, Kevin? So you can see this nice young lady, blue fins, yellow scuba tank, and it looks like she's diving in a spring. There's a lot of seaweed in the back there, and it's very, very clear. But once again, look, exciting hydro color. I'm not even sure what that is, but SkinDiver magazine was making a big deal. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to take one of these out. These special binders for SkinDiver magazine, they're actually wires, and you put the wire through the middle of each magazine right down the center of it, and then you can put those wires into the spine and hold it in place. Let me pull one of these out. In fact, I'll take that one out right there. That looks like a nice one. That's September, or color photographs. So look at here. This is an underwater color photograph of a coral reef. Now, when you look at this picture of this coral reef, and you compare it to a picture taken today by a professional underwater photographer, I'm the first to admit this looks pretty amateur. There's no question about it. I teach used to teach underwater photography, and if one of my students came to me with this picture, I would sit with him for half an hour and explain all the things that he could have done to make it a better picture. I wouldn't say it's a crappy picture to him. I wouldn't say that, discourage him, but I would sit down and say, now if you do this and do this and do this, then you'll get a better picture next time. It's the same thing. I'd be saying it's a crappy picture. Here's how to make it better. But you don't do that when you're teaching, right? But compared to modern photography, this is pretty amateur. 1964. Work with me on this. 1964. Underwater color photography was not an old technology. It was fairly new. Underwater color photography, with the lights, the loss of color and everything else, it's actually pretty amazing that it was even that good. But anyway, let's see what else there is in here. So I said with SkinDiver magazine and Harvey suits, $29. Guaranteed satisfaction for a custom-made wetsuit, $29.95. Why did I have this page marked? Oh, Technifacts. There was a column called Technifacts. This is kind of like our tech tips. Kevin? It's not, and see, no color, black and white. But you see here, this column, Technifacts by a gentleman, E.R. Cross. Cross was a well-known diver and author, underwater author. So he did Technifacts. It's kind of like Alec Peirce's Tech Tips. Huh? Let's see what else. Great reading in there. Back then, the big deal was diving on shipwrecks, finding shipwrecks, and collecting artifacts from them. Hey, listen, things change. When SkinDiver magazine first came out, okay, in the 50s and in the early 60s, it was all about spearfishing. That's right. The picture you saw, John Steele's pictures, and both those pictures involved spearfishing. And the magazine was about spearfishing because that's how this sport started. Like it or not, I mean, it's 2018, things change, okay? But this sport that you're enjoying as a scuba diver started from spearfishing. That's right. And so the first magazines, they emphasized that. And the front cover would have a guy with a beautiful big fish he speared, or maybe 2 or 3 guys, or a club outing, and they had a bunch of beautiful fish or lobsters, or whatever that they had speared. Then over a few years, over 5 or 10 years, it changed, and spearfishing was still an active sport, but it sort of went into the background a little bit. And as scuba diving became more popular, you see, and as scuba divers started looking for things underwater other than fish, like shipwrecks, treasure, artifacts, and so on, that became the most interesting and the most popular scuba activity. It wasn't photography, because photography was hard to do. So it became treasure hunting. And if you look on this title, it talks all about treasure hunting here and in the Mediterranean, all kinds of treasure hunting. And here's an article in here about sunken subs off the northeast coast. So off of New Jersey, New York, Maine, there are sunken subs. And it talks about the things that these guys found on these subs and brought to the surface. Now, here's another one here. This is about portion of, in the Mediterranean. And once again, they're looking at shipwrecks and bringing up artifacts. Okay? So that's what it was all about. Now it's changed again. As you know, and I know, sport changes, any activity changes. So now we discourage people taking things off the bottom off of shipwrecks. They had a personality spotlight. Oh yes, oh, it had to have this. Again, not another way of telling us, an old magazine. Every month there was a new Miss Driftwood. Yeah, Miss Driftwood. So a pretty lady, usually a skin diver, certainly at the very least in aquatics, would send in her picture. Somebody would send in her picture and she would be chosen and become Miss Driftwood for the month. You don't see that much anymore. And I recall that at the end of the year, and I think it was in November, they would put the pictures of all the previous 10 or 11 Miss Driftwoods, and the readers, the subscribers, would get to choose which one they liked the best, and they would vote. And on December, they would announce Miss International Temptress Contest or something like that. And they picked on, see, that's an old magazine. 64, how far back is that? Kevin, do the math for me there. I can't do that and do this too. So things change over the years. Today, that would not be something that we would see in magazines. New products, there was always a page with new products. Yeah, there's new products. Wetsuit gloves, yeah, new product. And other things, a camera, a new mask, a dive light. That looks like an Ike light, dive light. Yeah, Ike light, famous dive lights. Now, back then there were a new, oh, there's those fins, Kevin. Remember the fins we did just a little while ago, the fins that come apart? Yeah. There they are right there, new product. How about that, 1964. Now you know how old, that was just what? A few weeks ago we featured those fins in one of my Vintage Scuba videos. Got it? Yeah, okay. But on the West Coast in particular, up in Seattle and Washington and Oregon, there was an activity related to underwater hunting that the local skin divers and scuba divers enjoyed. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. A lot of spectators came out, and what they would do, they'd meet on a certain date, and out they would go. They'd usually be in teams. And the team of scuba divers would go out, and they had a limited time to catch and bring in as many octopus as they could. Yeah, octopus wrestling championships, it was called. And the octopus, they'd bring them in, and that team would weigh all the octopus through the day, put them back in the water, you know, usually, I'm sure they kept some, and octopus are good to eat, as you know, but they would weigh them, and at the end of the day, the team that had wrestled the most octopus into shore, Octopus Grapple. I have talked many, many times about Central SkinDivers, a dive shop located in Jamaica, New York, and in what is not now, at least it wasn't a few years ago, a very nice part of New York City and still a little bit dodgy, but at one time Central SkinDivers was there, a big store. It was run by a chap by the name of Honest Archie, and my first fins came from Honest Archie. My first homemade wetsuit, we just did didn't we just do a video on homemade wetsuits? And I mentioned Central SkinDivers and Honest Archie. And this was like Amazon. Amazon in the 60s. You send them the money and they send you stuff. Spearfishing, big article on spearfishing. You don't see that too much anymore. Although spearfishing is now recognized as an environmentally safe sport. Maybe not for the fish. This is underwater color photography at its best, 1964, as seen in Skin Diver magazine. And once again, if you compare this to the underwater photographs that you see today, this may look a little bit childish, but I can tell you that divers in 1964, when they saw this page, they went, wow, nice, moray eeling, great photograph, wow, I wish I could do that. Things change, huh? Anyway, there you go. A little bit of history. Skin Diver magazine was very definitely a big part of the development of this sport. And it's a piece of history. They went out of business a good many years ago, but it's well worth looking at. Maybe you can get them on eBay and other places once in a while, and cheap. They're pretty cheap, a few bucks. Pick up an old Skin Diver magazine and flip through it. I think you'll enjoy it. You might even learn something, who knows. Anyway, thanks again. Say goodbye to my good friends at Simply Scuba. Alec, Peirce, Vintage Scuba. Talk to you again soon, guys. Bye-bye.